What we will now do is discuss a topic called completing the square. We will use the approach of completing the square as a third method for solving quadratic equations, as well as a technique for how to convert a quadratic function that is given to us in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c form, into vertex form. In prior mathematics, you might have actually done completing the square. Please do not be concerned if you did not. The technique is not that difficult, although you will have to be careful in order to keep the steps clear and to not make an arithmetic error. So below we're going to find a couple of examples of this technique. We're first going to use the completing the square technique to solve a quadratic equation. So here's our example. Suppose I'd like to solve x squared minus 6x plus 7. And I'm going to solve this by completing the square. So I've listed out a group of steps. So the first step, and this is where sometimes I think students get confused, because the only technique we use to solve a quadratic where we need the constant on the other side. So the first thing we do is we get the constant term on the right-hand side of the equation all by itself. We isolate the constant term. The second step is the actual complete the square. So what we do is we complete the square on the left-hand side of the equation. To do this, we take 1/2 the coefficient of the x term and square it. So in this case, the coefficient of the x term is -6. So I take 1/2 of -6, which gives us -3, squared is 9. Now you may notice, because we're going to do the squaring, it doesn't really matter whether we take 1/2 of -6 or 1/2 of 6, because the resulting number is going to be positive regardless. So step 3, and this is the critical step, we're going to add the number that we found in step 2 to each side of the equation. And so notice I added 9 to the left side, I added 9 to the right side. And then I simplified the right-hand side. So that gives me x squared minus 6x plus 9 equals 2. By completing the square in this manner, what we get is a left-hand side of the equation that factors into two identical terms, two identical factors. X squared minus 6x plus 9 factors into x minus 3 multiplied by x minus 3, and so we get x minus 3 squared. So our equation ends up being x minus 3 squared is equal to 2. Now our last step is we're going to solve for x. So because I have a squared factor on the left, I'm going to take the square root, and I'll take the square root of both sides. So I get the square root of x minus 3 squared equals the square root of 2. But remember, any number when we go to take its square root has a plus or minus root. So I'll do plus or minus the square root of 2. On the left-hand side, the square root and the square cancel out for all practical purposes. And we get x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. When we solve for x, we get x equals 3 plus or minus the square root of 2. You should go into the book now and take a look at some of the problems that they have and make sure you feel comfortable solving quadratic equations by completing the square.